Pokémon fans! My name is Rosemary Kelley and I am a video game championship caster and recent TCG convert. On today's episode of Top Deck Academy, we'll be breaking down a Hydreigon Toolbox deck built by TCG caster Kenny Wisdom that focuses on the energy acceleration ability of Hydreigon from the Sword and Shield Darkness Ablaze expansion. Understanding the concepts I'll be talking about will require some previous TCG knowledge. If you're brand new to the game, I suggest checking out the How to Play videos on tcg.pokemon.com/howtoplay. This is a great place to get started if you are just getting into the game or are completely new. In Step 1 today, we'll go over the core concepts of this deck. In Step 2, we'll talk about why this is a toolbox type deck. And in Step 3, we'll cover our trainer cards. By the end of this video, you should feel confident taking this deck for a spin on the TCG Online ladder, and we'll have learned a couple of fundamental TCG concepts along the way. The core concept of this deck is to get a Hydreigon into play and use its Dark Squall ability to power up some really energy-hungry darkness-type attackers. I chose to talk about this deck because it's really great at explaining some fundamental TCG concepts. One of which is that this is an energy acceleration deck, meaning there are ways in this deck to attach multiple energy per turn. You may have heard this sort of deck referred to as a rain dance deck in the past, which is a reference that goes all the way back to base set Blastoise. Many decks in the Pokemon TCG are focused around accelerating energy in one way or another, and an ability like Rain Dance or Dark Squall is the most straightforward. You can attach any amount of energy, as long as it's a specific type. Circumventing the 1 energy per turn rule allows us to consider some attacking options that would normally be a little too slow. Guzzlord from Sun and Moon Cosmic Eclipse is the perfect example of this. Its Red Banquet attack is not energy efficient, but has a very strong effect in letting you take an extra prize card. Normally, it wouldn't be worth it to manually attach 4 energy turn after turn. But thanks to Hydreigon, we can start taking extra prize cards early and often. Looking at this strength from another lens, we have 1 copy of Grimmsnarl V, whose Spiky Knuckle attack is actually efficient from an energy cost to damage output ratio, but has a downside of having to return darkness energy to our hand. Well, it's supposed to be a downside, but in our deck it can largely be considered a good thing. Once we have the energy back in our hand, we're free to attach it wherever we like. It could go right back onto Grimmsnarl V, but we have options here. Lastly, the Tag Team Greninja and Zoroark GX rewards us for flooding our board with darkness energy with its first attack, Dark Pulse. These are 3 distinct examples of the advantages of this sort of Rain Dance deck. If you've been around the Pokemon TCG long enough, you've almost certainly heard of the term Toolbox Deck, which is a category that definitely applies here. A toolbox deck is a deck that focuses on multiple different attackers rather than just 1 or 2 that synergize really well together. We have 4 distinct attackers, not as many as some of the toolbox decks throughout Pokemon TCG history, but still enough to count. Unlike the term Rain Dance, Toolbox doesn't necessarily tell us anything about the strategy of the deck, just that we're going to have a bunch of different Pokemon to attack with. It's also important to note that we've built our deck in such a way that every Pokemon, other than the Jirachi and Dedenne GX, can attack with darkness energy. Crobat V and Hydreigon might not be the ideal attackers in all situations, but being able to drop a bunch of energy onto them and send them into the active spot is a relevant facet of the deck. Taking a look at the trainer cards that we have in the deck, we run the standard 4 copies of Professor's Research, but in addition to that, we also run 4 copies of Erica's Hospitality, over a different supporter card like Marnie. The reason for this is because we are looking for a lot of energy cards in the mid to late game, to put them into play and then do it all over again. That means we need supporter cards that are going to help us in this, as Erica's Hospitality will help us to draw cards into our hand, rather than Marnie that will shuffle them back into the deck. Supporter cards usually look for 1 or 2 key cards, but in this case, we are looking for a critical mass of energy cards. Apart from Erica's Hospitality, The deck list is more or less what you would expect, except for the 4 rare candy. This is a deck that cannot function without a Stage 2 Pokémon in play, so it's very important that we max out our numbers of cards like rare candy and play a higher than average number of Pokémon communication to ensure that we are giving ourselves the maximum chance to put a Hydreigon onto the board early. This is also the major downside of our deck. We have to spend a lot of deck slots to fit a reasonable Hydreigon line in, and then we have to put in the extra work to find and put into play the thing that makes our deck tick. Once we have a Hydreigon in play, we have a really strong advantage. But the inherent clunkiness of a Stage 2 focused deck means that in some number of games, we simply won't set up properly. Lastly, you'll see that we're running a full 12 copies of Darkness Energy. Whenever you're committing to an energy acceleration game plan, you're going to want to have as many energy cards as possible. And in this case, only Darkness Energy. To recap, we learned how to define an energy acceleration or rain dance deck type, as well as what it means to be a toolbox deck. We also learned about the inherent advantages and disadvantages to running a deck that relies heavily on Stage 2 Pokémon, what that does for our deck building, as well as what that does for our in-game consistency. What kind of acceleration or toolbox decks do you like to play? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you so much for watching this episode of Top Deck Academy. It's extra credit time! Here is the Hydreigon Toolbox deck list.